He was a man who had always controlled every part of his life. From the very beginning, he believed that success was a result of discipline, hard work, and never trusting people too easily. His home was always neat, his schedule precise, and every decision carefully thought out. He had everything he wanted: money, recognition, and a fiancée who had promised to stand by him through every high and low. Life seemed perfect, a steady climb toward even greater success. Until the night everything changed. It was a rainy evening when he left the office later than usual. The streets were slick, and the sound of rain hitting the car roof was almost hypnotic. He was tired, but satisfied with the day's accomplishments. The night air felt heavy, and visibility was poor. As he turned a corner, a sudden flash of lights and a screeching sound pierced the calm. The next moments were a blur. He remembered the feeling of impact, a force that knocked him forward, a sharp pain in his head, and then darkness. When he woke up, he was in a hospital room. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, and machines beeped steadily around him. His head throbbed, and his eyes felt heavy, though he couldn't tell if it was from the pain or something else. The doctor came in and explained in calm, measured words what had happened. There was no sugarcoating it. The accident was severe, and though his body would heal, his eyesight might never fully return. He felt a chill run down his spine, the kind that comes when you realize your life as you knew it could never be the same. The days that followed were confusing. He couldn't adjust to the darkness that seemed to be surrounding him constantly. He couldn't see the sunlight through the window or the familiar faces around him. Every step required caution, every movement careful calculation. Even simple tasks became mountains to climb. He felt trapped in a world that had suddenly lost all color and shape. His fiancée visited often, always speaking gently, holding his hand, promising him that she would be there no matter what. Yet a strange feeling nagged at him. Some moments felt authentic, like her voice carried real care, and others seemed rehearsed, as if she was performing kindness because she felt obligated. Amid the chaos and confusion, there was one constant figure in his life, the maid. She had been with him for years, quietly taking care of the house and helping him with daily chores. Now she became indispensable. She guided him through rooms, set out his meals, and patiently helped him learn to navigate a world that had suddenly become dangerous. Unlike his fiancé, she never spoke overly sweet words or promised anything grand. Her actions were simple, consistent, and steady. She did not pretend, she did not falter, and she never made him feel weak. There was a comforting reliability in her presence that no one else seemed to provide. He began to notice things he had never noticed before: the tone in voices, the sincerity behind gestures, and the way people reacted when they thought he couldn't see or hear. Small inconsistencies that he had once ignored now felt like cracks in a carefully built facade. His fiancée's visits started to feel less warm, more distant. She laughed at things he couldn't understand, whispered on the phone behind closed doors, and sometimes left the house with excuses that seemed unnecessary. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself he was imagining things. Yet, deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. Adjusting to life without sight also brought moments of self-reflection. He had always defined himself by control, by the ability to see and manipulate the world around him. Now stripped of that power, he had to rely on others, trust them, and accept help in ways he never had before. It was humbling. Each day brought small victories, finding his way to the kitchen, learning to dress himself, identifying objects by touch and sound, and each day also brought moments of fear, frustration, and loneliness. The world had become unpredictable, and he was no longer the master of it. Through all this, the maid remained a quiet anchor. She never asked questions, never complained, and always offered her assistance without fanfare. When he stumbled, she steadied him. When he felt afraid, she stayed near. When the fiancé's voice seemed distant and distracted, the maid's voice was clear, direct, and steady. In the chaos of his new life, she was a constant that he began to lean on more than he realized. As weeks turned into months, he started observing more closely. He could not see, but he could hear. He could not perceive expressions, but he could sense intentions. The world revealed itself to him in ways he had never experienced. He began to understand people on a level beyond appearances, noticing subtleties in tone, hesitation, and consistency. The maid's care felt genuine. She remembered the smallest details: his favorite tea, the way he liked his clothes arranged, the quiet moments he appreciated most. In contrast, his fiancée's gestures sometimes felt empty, more like obligations than acts of love. He began to question everything he had taken for granted. Who truly cared for him? Who loved him for who he was, and who stayed for convenience, comfort, or social expectation? The answers were not simple, and they were not immediate. But the first cracks of understanding were forming. He realized that, in losing his sight, he had gained the ability to see more clearly than ever before, not with his eyes, but with his instincts and heart. One evening, as he sat quietly in his room, listening to the rain tap against the window, he felt a strange sense of calm. The fear and confusion of the early days had lessened. He was beginning to accept his new reality. The accident had changed him, yes, but it had also opened his eyes in a different way. He could no longer rely on appearances or assumptions. He had to rely on truth, observation, and trust. And slowly, he started noticing who was truly present for him when it mattered most. That night, he realized that life had a way of revealing what was hidden beneath the surface. He might have lost his sight, but he was beginning to see people's hearts. And in that quiet realization, a new chapter of his life was quietly beginning, one where loyalty, patience, and genuine care would matter far more than wealth, status, or appearances. Months passed since the accident, and life had slowly settled into a new rhythm. He had adapted to many of the challenges, though each day still held moments of struggle. Simple things like moving around the house or recognizing the sounds of a familiar room were now part of his daily routine. Yet, he remained cautious, alert, and more aware than ever. Every step required careful attention, every sound carried a new meaning, and every interaction demanded a closer look at human behavior. During this time, he noticed more and more about the people around him. His fiancée continued to visit regularly, yet her presence began to feel different. She was polite, even sweet at times, but there were moments when her words seemed distant, rehearsed, or half-hearted. Sometimes he would overhear a phone conversation, snippets of laughter, or whispers that felt out of place. Other times she would sigh heavily, look at the walls, or fidget in ways that seemed to suggest impatience or frustration. He tried to ignore these small signs, convincing himself that he was being too sensitive. But the feeling that something was off refused to leave him. Meanwhile, the maid remained a quiet anchor. She had been part of his life long before the accident, but now her presence became invaluable. She guided him carefully around obstacles, reminded him of small details, and helped him manage tasks he could no longer do on his own. She did not speak extravagantly or offer empty reassurances. Instead, her care was practical, steady, and genuine. She had a way of making him feel safe, even when he felt vulnerable or unsure of himself. Her loyalty was unwavering, and the consistency of her actions slowly built a sense of trust that no words could match. One day, he decided to try something unusual. Though his vision was gradually improving, he chose to continue pretending that he was still blind. He wanted to see who truly cared for him, without the influence of pity or obligation. The decision was not easy, but he felt it was necessary. Life had changed so dramatically, and he needed clarity. He wanted to understand the true nature of the people around him, who loved him for himself, and who stayed for the convenience of his wealth, status, or charm. In the weeks that followed, he observed carefully. He watched how people interacted with him, how they spoke, and how their behavior changed when they thought he could not see. Some friends and acquaintances were kind, but their gestures often felt superficial. Others avoided him or spoke awkwardly, as if they were unsure of how to treat a man who had lost his sight. His fiancée, who had once been attentive and warm, now seemed distant. Her visits became shorter, and her attention often wandered. She laughed at jokes that didn't seem funny, and sometimes she looked at her phone with a distracted smile. The contrast between her behavior and the maid's was becoming increasingly clear. The maid never faltered. She was always present, always attentive, always patient. When he asked questions or needed help, she responded without complaint. When he stumbled or hesitated, she guided him gently, but firmly. When he felt frustrated or lonely, she stayed by his side quietly, offering comfort through her presence rather than her words. It was this quiet, unwavering support that made him begin to notice the difference between true loyalty and superficial affection. One evening, he decided to test the people around him further. He asked for help with tasks that he had already learned to manage himself. He watched how his fiancée reacted. Sometimes she helped, but often she seemed annoyed, impatient, or distracted. She rushed through tasks, muttered complaints, or disappeared for long periods under the pretext of other duties. In contrast, the maid approached every task calmly, carefully, and without complaint. She treated him with respect, not as someone weak, but as someone who simply needed support in a new and challenging situation. These observations began to affect his emotions. He felt a mixture of sadness, disappointment, and growing clarity. The woman he had planned to spend his life with was not the person he had thought she was. The betrayal was subtle, but undeniable, a pattern of behavior that revealed itself over time. At the same time, he felt gratitude and a quiet affection for the maid, whose consistency and care were becoming impossible to ignore. He began to realize that love and loyalty were not defined by grand gestures or romantic promises, but by small, everyday actions that demonstrated genuine care. Despite the growing clarity, he remained cautious. He did not confront anyone, nor did he reveal the truth about his regained sight. Instead, he continued to observe, to listen, and to allow the truth to reveal itself naturally. He wanted to understand the motivations and feelings of the people around him, and he wanted to see the maid's loyalty without interfering. There was a patience in him now, a willingness to wait for life to show its true colors. Even when the waiting was difficult or painful, in the quiet moments of the night, he reflected on his journey. The accident had taken his sight, but it had also given him insight. He could now see people in ways he had never imagined, not with his eyes, but with his heart and mind. He understood that appearances could be deceiving, and that true character revealed itself in the smallest of actions. The maid's presence, her patience, her unwavering support, and her quiet respect had become a guiding light in his life. In contrast, the fiancé's distant behavior and lack of genuine care were becoming increasingly apparent. Life continued in this delicate balance. He maintained the facade of blindness, observing, listening, and learning. He learned to navigate the complexities of human behavior and relationships with a new level of awareness. He realized that the accident, while tragic, had provided him with an opportunity to see the truth about the people he cared about most. It had stripped away superficial layers, revealing loyalty, love, and character in ways he could never have anticipated. Over time, he began to form a deeper bond with the maid. It was not yet romantic, and it was not yet fully conscious, but it was a bond built on trust, respect, and genuine care. He found comfort in her presence, knowing that she would never abandon him, deceive him, or treat him as less than he was. This realization brought a quiet sense of hope, a sense that despite the betrayal and disappointment he had experienced, there was still goodness and loyalty in the world. He also noticed subtle changes in himself. The accident had forced him to rely on others, to accept help, and to see the world from a different perspective. He had learned humility, patience, and empathy. He had learned to value actions over words and loyalty over appearances. These lessons were shaping him into a man who could recognize genuine care and love when it appeared, and who could distinguish it from superficial gestures or deceit. The more he observed, the more he understood that life was revealing its truth slowly, carefully, and deliberately. His fiancée's behavior was becoming increasingly inconsistent and revealing. While the maid's actions continued to demonstrate unwavering loyalty, he realized that he needed to remain patient, to allow events to unfold naturally, and to wait for the right moment to act. In this patience, he found strength, clarity, and a growing sense of purpose. By the end of these months, he had reached a quiet understanding. He knew that he could not ignore the signs of betrayal, nor could he ignore the signs of true loyalty. He understood that the journey ahead would be challenging. Decisions would need to be made, and that actions would have consequences. Yet he also understood that he had the insight, patience, and awareness to navigate this journey successfully. He had learned to see without eyes, to understand without words, and to recognize truth without being told. And in this understanding, he found the first glimmers of hope and clarity in a life that had been irrevocably changed by the accident. The days passed, but he felt a growing unease that he could no longer ignore. Though he was pretending to remain blind, he had regained enough vision to notice subtle things: body language, movement, the way people carried themselves in his presence. One afternoon, he decided to test the limits of the people around him. He wanted to see with his own eyes and not just intuition. How those closest to him would behave if they thought he could not see. It started innocuously. He would place objects slightly out of their usual positions, listen for tone changes in conversations, and watch how his fiancée reacted to simple questions. Her behavior was increasingly inconsistent. Sometimes she would answer carefully, with a soft tone, pretending concern. Other times her responses were rushed, distracted, almost dismissive. He could hear her sigh when she thought he was not paying attention. Her patience seemed to run out more quickly than it ever had before the accident. He began to feel a mixture of disappointment, sadness, and quiet determination. One evening, as he sat in the living room listening to the quiet hum of the house, he overheard a conversation that he could not ignore. The fiancé, thinking he could not see or hear anything, was speaking to someone in another room. Her laughter was casual, careless, and surprisingly cruel. She made remarks about his temporary blindness, describing it as a burden she could no longer tolerate. She spoke freely about frustrations that he had never imagined she felt, mocking his vulnerability and expressing relief that he would never truly know what she had been saying. Each word cut deeper than the physical pain of the accident. He realized the depth of her betrayal, and the quiet anger and hurt began to settle in his chest. He did not confront her immediately. Instead, he continued observing, listening, and documenting her behavior in his mind. He wanted to understand whether this was a one-time lapse or a pattern of betrayal that had existed all along. In the meantime, the maid continued her work quietly, diligently, and without fanfare. She showed no signs of judgment, no frustration, no hesitation. She treated him with unwavering respect and care, guiding him through the smallest tasks, ensuring his comfort, and offering a calm presence in the midst of emotional turmoil. The contrast between the two women became more pronounced every day. He realized that love and loyalty could be observed not in grand gestures, in consistency, patience, and quiet attention to another person's needs. The maid's loyalty was silent, yet powerful, a steady force that supported him without demanding anything in return. In comparison, the fiancé's behavior revealed selfishness, impatience, and disregard for his feelings. She stayed when it was convenient and withdrew when it was not, demonstrating that her care had always been conditional. This realization brought him both clarity and a sense of sadness. He had invested trust and affection in someone who had betrayed him, someone who had prioritized her own comfort and convenience over genuine concern for his well-being. The pain of recognizing this truth was intense, yet he also felt a growing sense of strength. He understood that life had revealed the true nature of those around him, and now he had the power to act with awareness. Rather than naivety, he decided to test the fiancée further. Observing her reactions to small requests and changes in routine, each test reinforced what he had already suspected. She would sigh audibly when asked to assist, make excuses, and display visible signs of irritation. Her laughter, once familiar and comforting, now sounded hollow, disconnected from genuine emotion. Her words were polite, but her actions betrayed indifference. She was no longer the person he had believed her to be. Meanwhile, the maid remained a constant presence. She never complained, never rushed, never expressed frustration. She remembered small details he had long forgotten, anticipated his needs without being asked, and provided care in ways that were subtle but profoundly meaningful. She guided him through his limited vision with patience, ensuring his safety and comfort. Every interaction, no matter how small, reinforced the trust he had in her and highlighted the contrast between her loyalty and the fiancé's inconsistency. As the days went on, the fiancé's behavior became increasingly reckless. She was careless in conversation, careless in attention, and careless in her promises. He began to realize that her actions had not changed because of the accident, but had always been part of her character, hidden beneath superficial charm and occasional displays of affection. Her true colors were now visible, illuminated by the challenge that life had presented. She was not malicious, but she lacked the depth of loyalty, patience, and genuine care that he had come to value above all else. He began to reflect on his own responses. Pretending to be blind had given him insight into human behavior, revealing truth that would have otherwise remained hidden. He understood the importance of observation, patience, and discernment. He had learned that actions, more than words, demonstrated true character. He recognized that love, trust, and loyalty were not guaranteed by promises, appearances, or convenience, but were proven through consistent, selfless behavior. The revelation about the fiancé's betrayal was painful, yet it brought clarity. He understood that he needed to distance himself from relationships that were conditional, superficial, or self-serving. The experience also strengthened his bond with the maid, whose actions had consistently demonstrated authenticity, respect, and care. He began to see that loyalty could not be taught or demanded, but was a quality inherent in those who valued integrity and empathy. One evening, after observing the fiancé yet again displaying disinterest and indifference, he made a quiet decision. He would not confront her immediately, nor would he react impulsively. Instead, he would allow events to unfold naturally, giving her behavior space to reveal the full extent of her character. In contrast, he would continue to observe and appreciate the maid's unwavering support, recognizing that her loyalty was not contingent on circumstance or convenience. In his private moments, he reflected deeply on the lessons of the past months. The accident had taken his sight, but it had also given him a perspective that was sharper than vision alone could provide. He had learned to perceive intentions, discern character, and recognize loyalty without relying on appearances or words. The maid's presence had become a source of stability and comfort, a reminder that true care does not need to be dramatic or performative, but is often quiet, consistent, and selfless. The fiancé's betrayal had also imparted a critical lesson. He realized that love without loyalty is fragile, and that affection without consistent action is hollow. The contrast between the maid and the fiancé was a daily reminder of the value of integrity, its patience, and unwavering support. It reinforced the idea that trust must be earned, observed, and maintained through consistent action rather than assumed based on words or promises. As weeks passed, he felt a growing sense of emotional clarity. He understood the necessity of careful observation and measured response. He began to plan his next steps, considering how to address the betrayal, preserve dignity, and protect his emotional well-being. The experience had reshaped his understanding of relationships, revealing the profound difference between conditional affection and genuine loyalty. At the same time, his bond with the maid deepened naturally. It was not yet romantic, but it was a connection built on trust, respect, and genuine care. Her consistent presence, thoughtful actions, and unwavering support had earned his admiration and gratitude. He recognized that these qualities were rare, and that their value far exceeded any superficial gestures of love or convenience. The fiancé, unaware of his regained sight and keen observation, continued to display her true nature. Her impatience, indifference, and lack of genuine concern reinforced his understanding of her character. Each interaction further solidified his resolve to disengage from relationships that were conditional, and to invest in those that demonstrated loyalty and authenticity. Through all this, he learned patience, empathy, and discernment. He discovered the power of quiet observation, the importance of evaluating actions over words, and the value of recognizing true loyalty when it appeared. The accident, while devastating in its immediate impact, had provided him with insight, clarity, and a deeper understanding of human nature. It had revealed the importance of consistency, care, and integrity in relationships, and highlighted the difference between superficial affection and genuine devotion. By the end of this period, he felt a quiet sense of preparedness. He was ready to confront the truths that had been revealed, make decisions about his relationships, and act with awareness and confidence. He had learned to see beyond appearances, to value actions over promises, and to recognize loyalty and love when they were demonstrated authentically. The lessons of betrayal, observation, and quiet support had reshaped his understanding of human relationships, preparing him for the challenges and choices that lay ahead. The fiancé's betrayal weighed heavily on his heart. Yet he remained calm, patient, and observant. He had seen enough to know her true character, and now he was determined to focus on what mattered most: the people who had shown loyalty, care, and patience. The maid whose quiet consistency had been a guiding light through the darkness of his accident, had earned a place of respect and trust in his life that no one else could claim. One evening, after a particularly long day, he returned home feeling weary and emotionally drained. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint clatter of dishes in the kitchen. He could hear the maid moving about, tidying up, organizing, and preparing his evening meal. Her footsteps were steady, confident, and reassuring. He realized in that moment how much her presence had come to mean to him, not as a servant, not as someone he could simply rely on for physical assistance, but as a person whose support had become indispensable to his sense of stability. He decided to test the depth of her loyalty, not by deception or manipulation, but through subtle observation. He asked for help with tasks that were familiar to him, tasks he could manage independently with his partial vision. He watched her response carefully. She did not hesitate, did not sigh, and did not complain. She guided him patiently, anticipated his needs, and spoke in a tone that was calm, respectful, and comforting. Each small gesture, each act of quiet care, reinforced the deep trust he had come to feel for her. In contrast, his behavior continued to highlight her self-interest. She arrived at the house with a distracted demeanor, focused more on appearances and convenience than on genuine care. She spoke politely, but her actions betrayed disinterest and impatience. The contrast between her and the maid became impossible to ignore. He saw clearly that loyalty, true care, and affection were not demonstrated through grand gestures or romantic words, but through consistent, patient, and selfless actions as the days went on. He spent more time observing and reflecting on the lessons the past months had taught him. The accident had taken away his sight, but it had also given him a new way of seeing the world through careful observation, listening, and emotional awareness. He had learned to recognize true loyalty, to discern genuine care from superficial gestures, and to value actions over promises. The maid's presence had become the measure of these qualities, a living example of how selflessness and patience could provide strength, comfort, and stability in times of hardship. One evening, he decided to have a deeper conversation with the maid. He wanted to express his gratitude not through grand words, but through honest acknowledgement of her support and care. He spoke softly, explaining how much her presence had meant to him during his recovery and adjustment to life with limited vision. She listened attentively, her calm demeanor reflecting genuine concern and understanding. Her response was modest, emphasizing that she had only done what she believed was right and necessary. It was in her humility, her quiet strength, and her unwavering commitment that he recognized the depth of her loyalty. The realization struck him profoundly. True love and loyalty were not always dramatic or obvious. They were often quiet, consistent, and selfless. The maid had been a constant source of support, never seeking reward or recognition, and always prioritizing his well-being. In contrast, the fiancé's conditional affection had been revealed through subtle, repeated behaviors that demonstrated impatience, disinterest, and self-interest. He understood that his heart and trust had to be aligned with those who had proven themselves, not with those who had merely promised or pretended. Over the following weeks, he began to appreciate the maid not just for her loyalty, but for the person she was. Her calmness in the face of challenges, her attentiveness to small details, and her ability to provide support without intrusion or judgment created a profound sense of connection. He found comfort in her presence, knowing that her actions were driven by genuine care rather than obligation or expectation. This realization brought a sense of peace and clarity that had been absent since the accident. The fiancée, meanwhile, continued to reveal her true character. She arrived at the house infrequently, her visits marked by impatience, distraction, and lack of engagement. She spoke politely, but her words lacked sincerity, and her actions confirmed her indifference. He observed this pattern carefully, noting the stark difference between her behavior and the maid's consistent support. It became increasingly clear that the fiancé's affection had been conditional, dependent on convenience and personal benefit. While the maid's loyalty was unwavering and genuine, he began to understand the profound impact of consistent, selfless support in human relationships. It was not always visible or dramatic, but it provided a foundation of trust and stability that was invaluable. The maid's actions demonstrated that love and loyalty were proven through everyday gestures, attentiveness, and the willingness to prioritize another person's well-being without expectation of reward or recognition. This realization reshaped his understanding of relationships, trust, and emotional connection. One afternoon, he found himself reflecting on the journey that had led him to this point. The accident, while devastating, had revealed truths that he might never have discovered otherwise. It had forced him to see beyond appearances, to value actions over words, and to recognize loyalty and genuine care when they appeared. The maid's consistent support had become a beacon of trust, comfort, and understanding, guiding him through the complexities of his changed life. In contrast, the fiancé's betrayal had underscored the importance of discerning true character and aligning one's trust and affection with those who demonstrated authenticity. He realized that the lessons of the past months extended beyond his immediate relationships. They had taught him patience, empathy, and discernment. He had learned to observe carefully, to value consistency and selflessness, and to recognize the true nature of those around him. The maid's loyalty had become a symbol of these qualities, providing a tangible example of the power of quiet, consistent care. As the weeks turned into months, he felt a growing sense of clarity and resolve. He understood that his future relationships would need to be built on trust, loyalty, and genuine care rather than appearances, convenience, or superficial gestures. The maid's presence had demonstrated that such qualities existed and that they were invaluable. He began to consider how to honor this loyalty, how to recognize and nurture the connection that had developed naturally over time. At the same time, he knew that difficult decisions awaited. The fiancé's betrayal had revealed that not all relationships were built to last, that some connections were conditional and superficial. He needed to address these truths to protect his emotional well-being and to align his life with those who had proven themselves trustworthy and loyal. The maid's consistent presence had provided a model for what he should value and seek in the future. In private moments, he reflected on the depth of the lessons he had learned. The accident had taken his sight, but it had also provided insight that went far beyond physical vision. He had learned to perceive intentions, discern character, and recognize loyalty without relying on appearances or words. The maid's quiet, consistent support had become a source of strength, comfort, and clarity. Guiding him through a period of profound emotional and personal growth, he began to plan the next steps in his life with care and deliberation. He understood that trust had to be earned and observed, that loyalty was demonstrated through actions rather than words, and that genuine care could not be assumed or demanded. The maid's presence had shown him what true support looked like, and he knew that his future decisions would need to reflect the lessons he had learned about human character, relationships, and emotional connection. Through all of this, he discovered a profound truth: love, trust, and loyalty were proven not through grand gestures, promises, or appearances, but through quiet, consistent, and selfless actions. The maid's unwavering support had demonstrated this truth in every aspect of daily life. From guiding him through simple tasks to offering comfort during moments of emotional struggle, her presence had become a foundation of trust, stability, and understanding, providing a clear example of the qualities he should seek and value in the future. By the end of this period, he felt a growing sense of preparedness and clarity. He was ready to confront the truths that had been revealed, make decisions about his relationships, and act with awareness and confidence. He understood the importance of aligning his trust and affection with those who had demonstrated loyalty and genuine care. The maid's consistent presence had provided a model for what true support and love looked like, and he knew that his future would need to be shaped around these lessons. Months had passed since he'd begun observing the true nature of those around him, and clarity had replaced the confusion and pain that had once dominated his life. The fiancé's betrayal was no longer a source of shock, but a lesson in human behavior, loyalty, and love. He had come to understand that appearances could be deceiving and that words were often empty without actions to support them. In contrast, the maid's quiet, consistent care had revealed the true meaning of devotion and selfless support. One evening, he sat alone in the living room, reflecting on everything that had transpired. The house was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the maid moving through the rooms, attending to her tasks. He realized that through all the hardships, he had discovered a deeper understanding of human relationships. Love, he now understood, was not about grand gestures, promises, or social expectations. It was about consistent care, patience, and loyalty shown through everyday actions, no matter how small. He decided that it was time to address the situation with the fiancée. The decision was not made out of anger or revenge, but out of a need for clarity and closure. He called her into the living room, his voice calm but firm. She entered, sensing perhaps the seriousness of the moment. He explained that he had regained his sight some time ago and had observed her actions carefully. He recounted the moments when her behavior had revealed her true intentions and expressed how disappointed he was to see that her affection had been conditional. The fiancé's reaction was a mixture of shock, guilt, and regret. She had believed that her actions were hidden, that she could behave as she pleased without consequences. Now, confronted with the truth, she realized that the trust she had taken for granted had been broken. He told her calmly that the relationship could no longer continue, not out of spite, but because he had learned the value of true loyalty and care. She left the house quietly, and he felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The chapter had ended, but the lessons it had imparted would guide him for a lifetime in the days that followed. He focused on the maid, whose presence had been a constant source of comfort and guidance. He began to notice her in ways he had not before, not just as someone who assisted him, but as a person whose actions reflected integrity, patience, and genuine concern. He realized that the bond between them had grown stronger, built not on words or promises, but on shared experiences, consistent support, and mutual respect. He began to express his appreciation in small, meaningful ways. He would ask for her advice, include her in decisions, and acknowledge her contributions openly. She responded with humility, never expecting recognition, yet clearly moved by his respect and trust. Their relationship developed naturally, grounded in understanding and shared experiences. It was a quiet, slow-building connection, one that was far more meaningful than superficial expressions of love. Life continued, but with a new perspective. He had learned to value actions over words, consistency over charm, and loyalty over convenience. The maid's unwavering support had shown him the true meaning of devotion. He began to rely on her not just for physical assistance, but for emotional guidance, trusting her insight and valuing her presence. She had become a cornerstone in his life, someone whose actions spoke louder than any promise could. As the months progressed, he noticed subtle changes in himself as well. The accident, while devastating, had transformed him. He had become more patient, more observant, and more understanding of human nature. He no longer rushed to judgment, instead taking the time to observe, listen, and assess character. He had learned that true relationships were built on trust, respect, and consistent care, rather than appearances or convenience. The maid had been the living example of these qualities, teaching him through action rather than words. Their bond deepened further as they spent more time together. He found comfort in her presence during quiet evenings, enjoyed her company during shared tasks, and valued her counsel in moments of decision-making. He realized that love, in its truest form, was not about urgency or spectacle. It was about trust, patience, and the unwavering willingness to support someone through difficulties. Regardless of recognition or reward, the fiancé's absence, while initially painful, no longer felt like a loss. He had gained something far more valuable: clarity, understanding, and a relationship built on genuine loyalty. The contrast between betrayal and steadfastness had provided a profound lesson in human nature. He now understood that people's true character is revealed not in comfort, but in moments of challenge, when circumstances test loyalty, patience, and care. One afternoon, he sat with the maid, reflecting on how far they had come. He spoke gently about the journey they had shared, about the lessons he had learned, and about the respect and trust he had developed for her. She listened quietly, her calm demeanor reflecting understanding and modesty. She spoke of her commitment to her work, her desire to provide support, and her belief in doing what was right without expectation of reward. In that moment, he realized that their bond had become one of mutual respect and deep appreciation. He began to consider the future with clarity. The lessons from the past months had reshaped his understanding of relationships and human nature. He recognized the value of loyalty, patience, and selfless support, and he resolved to build his future around these principles. The maid, whose actions had consistently demonstrated these qualities, had earned his trust and admiration. Their relationship, though gradual and measured, was grounded in authenticity and shared experience, providing a solid foundation for the future. He reflected on the accident that had changed his life. What initially seemed like a devastating loss had ultimately provided insight, clarity, and understanding. He had learned to see beyond appearances, to value actions over words, and to recognize loyalty and genuine care. The maid's unwavering support had been a guiding force, teaching him that love is proven not through grand gestures or promises, but through consistent, selfless actions. In private moments, he acknowledged the growth he had experienced. He had become more discerning, more patient, and more appreciative of genuine care. He understood that relationships built on integrity, trust, and consistent support were far more valuable than those built on convenience, charm, or superficial affection. The maid had shown him the depth of loyalty and devotion that could exist in everyday life, and he was determined to honor and nurture that connection. As time passed, he began to plan his life with a sense of purpose and awareness. He knew that future relationships would need to be built on the principles he had learned: trust, loyalty, patience, and consistent care. The maid, whose actions had exemplified these qualities, had become central to his understanding of what true support and love looked like. He recognized that her presence had been a gift, providing guidance, stability, and comfort through challenging times. In the end, he realized that losing his sight had allowed him to see more clearly than ever before. He could now discern true character, recognize genuine loyalty, and value actions over words. The maid had become not just a companion, but a teacher, guiding him through a period of growth, understanding, and emotional maturity. Her presence had revealed the depth of human kindness and loyalty, demonstrating that love and care are proven through consistent, selfless actions, not superficial gestures or promises. The fiancé's betrayal, while painful, had been an essential lesson. It had shown him the importance of discernment, the necessity of observation, and the value of aligning trust and affection with those who had demonstrated authenticity. In contrast, the maid's consistent support had provided a model of loyalty, patience, and selfless care, teaching him that true love is quiet, steady, and unwavering. By the end of this journey, he felt a profound sense of clarity, peace, and understanding. He had learned to navigate human relationships with discernment, to value loyalty and consistent care above all else, and to recognize the difference between superficial affection and genuine devotion. The maid had become the embodiment of these principles, providing guidance, support, and comfort through actions rather than words. In the quiet of the evening, As he sat reflecting on the months that had passed, he realized that life had given him a profound gift through hardship: the accident, the betrayal, and the consistent support of the maid had reshaped his understanding of love, loyalty, and human character. He had learned that true relationships are built on trust, patience, and consistent selfless care, and that those who demonstrate these qualities are invaluable. With this understanding, he felt prepared to embrace the future, grounded in clarity, wisdom, and a deep appreciation for the people who had shown their true hearts through actions rather than words.